Hey Katie, it's Liam here. Like I told you during the golf school, I'm going to make these videos for the participants because especially as a beginner, I think there's an awful lot we go over and there's an awful lot to cover. So I want to kind of summarize what I think is important for you, and so you have this so you can go back and look at it and you can remember some of the things I think are important and some of the things I think you need to work on. So here we go. We're going to get real basic here. Most beginner golfers don't make very good contact. And the reason they don't make very good contact is because most beginner golfers are trying to hit the ball up in the air, which they see on TV. They see other golfers do that. But they're trying to lift the golf ball up in the air, or they make contact on the ascending portion of the arc. It is so important for us in golf that we hit the ball on the downward portion of our arc, and where we hit down on the golf ball. Now, what the heck do I mean by that? You're about to see some bad artwork here. So I'm going to draw a little arc here. I'm going to try to draw a little arc. It's going to be pretty bad. So the club comes, ideally, every time I take a swing, the club comes down, bottoms out, and then it will start to ascend. Okay. And what most beginner golfers do, because they're trying to hit the golf ball up in the air, is they hit the ball on this portion of the arc. So the ball is, let's say, right here. I draw a little ball there. And we're starting to lift up. So the club is starting to come up in the air. And what tends to happen is that when the club is coming on the ascending portion of the arc, the bottom of the club is going to tend to hit equator or above equator of the ball and will tend to top the golf ball. So what we really try to do in golf is we try to hit the ball as the club is still on the downward portion of the arc. We're trying to hit the back edge of the ball or have the club completely behind it or underneath it, but we're still trying to get the club to move downward into the ground after we make contact to the golf ball. And that's almost the number one thing I want you to take away from that clinic, is we have to do a good job of doing that to be consistent at golf. In chipping, which you're going to see here, it is easier to do. Because when we're chipping, we can kind of get set up with our weight a little leaning forward. We get set up with our hands forward, which is what you see right here, what I call shaft lean. You're leaning the shaft forward. We can also kind of put the ball back in the stance. So in theory then, because your hands are up here, because your weight shift is leaning forward, the bottom of the arc is going to be somewhere here. Okay, but we're going to hit the ball before we get to the bottom of the arc, if that makes sense. So we'll see how you did it. We have two chips here on video. This is the second one, which is slightly better than the first one, and I'll tell you why. Let's watch this first one first. The second one first, I should say. So your club comes back. On a longest chip, Katie, we probably ought to have more wrist hinge than this. Or in other words, like I said, you should make an L for Liam, like that. In the swing, we make an L for Liam. In short chips, we don't. But if I remember right, we're trying to hit this chip about 30 yards. So maybe a little bit of wrist hinge in this chip. But as you come down, the club is moving downward, which is good. Downward, downward. We hit the back of the ball as the club is still moving downward. Its low point is probably right here somewhere, and then the club starts to ascend. And that's why you hit a very good looking chip, which you can tell the ball is ricocheting off the face of the club and up in the air. Now ideally when we come down in, we like to see the hands a little bit more in front of the club head. So when we start it, I'll run you back to the start here. Your hands were right on that line. Obviously, I started that line right on the tip of your hands there. As we get to impact, notice they're not quite to that line yet. So our shaft's tilted, not quite as much shaft lean as what we started with. And that may happen for different reasons. Maybe your weight moves back, and maybe you use a little wrist. In this case, I think your weight just moved back just a little bit. But ideally what we do as we go through is we're just turning our body. We're allowing the club to still move down, and then the club, because we're turning our body, is going to move to the left and ideally stay a little bit lower than the hands right there. So it's a really good motion right there. That was the second of your chips. This first one, I want you to notice you use just a little bit of wrist here. So same ball position, same tilt to the club, it's set up. As you come down, you are not going to have quite as much shaft lean the moment of impact as what we just saw, I believe. Okay. If you notice, just a little bit in these couple frames right here. Let me get rid of that line. Your club is pivoting just a little bit. In other words, your wrists are working right there a little bit. You see your right hand kind of scoop under the club, under the grip portion of the club. If you look closely with your left arm and wrist, you'll see that you break down a little bit. You don't maintain good extension going through that shot, which is fine. You hit a good shot there, but that's where it starts to get a little scary when you do that and you don't turn through the shot. Occasionally you're going to catch the ball on the way up, and we'll have a tendency to hit tops. So if you can chip them all like you did your second swing there, the one we looked at first, where you're turning a little bit more and not using your wrists, you'll be much more consistent. Okay. Now the same is really true in the golf swing for you. That's kind of the number one thing we're working on. First of all, when you get set up to a shot, I like to see you a little closer to the golf ball. There's way too much room between your hands and your legs right there. So I'm going to ask you to get a little closer to the golf ball so that the shaft of the club, when it gets set up, points at your belt buckle. Okay, so the closer you get, the more your hands are going to kind of work down, and closer to you, the more the shaft of the club will point at the belt buckle and not really kind of upward into the upper part of the stomach there. Okay, so we got to get a little closer to the ball in your setup. This is probably the first swing, one of the first swings we took. And you got a good swing. Notice in your backswing, your right leg tends to hyperextend there a little bit. Great path to your swing. You didn't quite get this club low enough. Okay, and your club finishes all the way around behind your back. From this angle, good looking setup. Ball with an irons in the middle of the stance. You kind of notice your right leg hyperextends a little bit, and it looks like their weight is on the back outside of your foot. So as you go back, it looks like the weight kind of gets on the outside of your foot here. Again, this is before we started, really, before we started working on your golf swing. The moment of impact, after impact even, notice your right foot's still on the ground on this shot. So there's your right foot on the ground, on the ground, on the ground, on the ground. You're well into your follow-through, well into your follow-through. Now it'll start to come off the ground a little bit, not a whole lot. But it's almost like someone poured concrete around your foot there. Yep. Sorry, give me a second here. This is a little later on the first day. It still looks like the weight goes to the back foot a little bit, but no, you're not hyperextending it nearly as much. And our goal the first day was just to try to get you to move your weight more forward as you swing, which is still going to be something we talk about. So notice right here your right knee starts to move a little bit, which is good. That's what we started working on. I want it to happen quicker in the golf swing as we swing it down. Okay, so notice as we go through here, your right foot's moving off the ground quicker and more than what we saw to start with. And I like this finish position here, just a little bit more turn, and the hands and arms aren't going quite as far around behind you. Here we are the second day. Again, we didn't do a very good job of getting you closer to the golf ball. I think you do a little better job of turning here. Your right leg still has some flex to it, but I think you turned more than what you saw on the first day. And again, now you're starting to look at your right knee, starting to see it move forward. And the more that weight shift moves forward, Katie, as you swing, the better the chances of us of hitting down on it. If our weight stays too far back, like what we saw in your first couple of videos from the first day, we're going to have a tendency to hit up on the golf ball and not get the club low enough to get under the golf ball. Right here, this is a real good position right here. Notice your right knee is kind of leaning in forward. Your right foot's coming off the ground. And we see good extension as you go through. Real important for you to do. I like how we lean the shaft here forward at setup. You do a good job of turning without moving the weight to the back of your foot. You can see the definite difference right there. Real good turn right there of the waist. You're getting your right hip moving backwards. Good body position there. And we're trying now to move our weight forward. You can see the left foot starts to tap on the ground. Moving the right knee forward so as we come down in, our hands are in front of the ball. And your right foot comes off the ground. And just a good, nice extension right there. That's what we're looking for you to do so you get better and more consistent contact. Katie, it was a pleasure meeting you and pleasure working with you, and we'll see you out here at the club. Thank you.